Welcome to The Naked Podcaster. Get ready to hear the story of someone strong enough to bear it all. The Naked Podcaster is a representation of freeing yourself, giving you permission to be real in all your quirkiness, baggage, struggles to success, and tragedy to triumph. I'm so excited you're joining the journey. Your past doesn't define you, but it does lead you on a path to today. Let's get naked. Welcome to the Naked Podcaster. I'm Jen Taylor. I'm here with Natalie Ihde. Natalie, how are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm so excited to talk with you today, Jen.
I am too. This is my favorite thing to do ever in the world. So you have a website. It's easy because it's natalieihde.net. And I will have that in the show notes because your last name's not pronounced like it's spelled in my mind. So tell me who you are and what you do.
So I am a personal development coach to the aspiring mompreneur. I help moms who are in a job, right? Somewhere where maybe they felt at home once. I'm a personal development coach for the aspiring mompreneur. I help moms who kind of feel unfulfilled in their job, right? Just over broke. These positions that we may have fallen into, but not necessarily pursued as a degree or as our passion originally. And I help them to find that passion again and realize that they can monetize it and actually like create their own business and either leave it as a side business or create it into, make it into something bigger. And from there, they can essentially be the person, the woman they were meant to be, along with the mom they always foresaw themselves being, the wife, spouse, partner, whatever title they are, that they see themselves being.
Which is amazing because a lot of us don't think we can do anything else. Like you just kind of get into this situation that's not bad, but maybe not what you want ideally.
Exactly.
Do you find that women are not sure of what to do and how to do it?
100%. When you bring up the term side hustle or you ask somebody about a business, automatically our minds, for many women, go to slimy MLM tactics, right? And I'm not saying MLMs, network marketers, direct salespeople, they're not slimy, but there are a few bad eggs that have kind of ruined it for the whole bunch, right? There've been maybe some bad companies in the past or just bad salespeople in the past who have made it so that anytime anybody thinks of some kind of side business, they think that there's something like wrong or dirty or slimy behind it, or the person who has something on the side is trying to take advantage of somebody else for their betterment. And that's not necessarily the truth. I'm going to say probably 99% of the time, that's not the truth in my experience. It's just people who want to up-level their lives, and maybe they want to just have a vacation fund. Maybe they want to supplement their existing retirement accounts or something like that. Maybe they want to get a jump start on saving for their kids' college, and their kids are small and they have all the college savings accounts and things like that, but they do a side hustle so that they can just add more into it so they don't have to struggle in 20 years when their kids are in college. Most people think that there's just something bad about it if you're not working for somebody else. If you're not in some type of institution, if you don't go to a building somewhere and park yourself at a desk and, complain all day long, right?
Which is stressful and not fun. And also for most moms, the stress issues predominantly in my research have been not enough money and not enough time. And those two things skip and hold hands, and maybe not wanting to leave their kids at work while they go to work, or so you're just in this constant hamster wheel. So let's go back. Tell me, because I brought up your accent before we got on.
Yes.
'Cause I'm from New England. So tell me where you grew up and who you are and kind of what molded all of this.
Sure. So I am from the Chicago suburbs. A lot of people, I always clarify Chicago suburbs because there are people who are actually from the city who get very upset when us suburbanites say we're from Chicago, and we're just using it as a point of reference because nobody knows where, these individual little towns are. So but I've lived in a few different towns during my life, and I've always been an Illinois girl. That's not to say I'll always be an Illinois girl, but I've always been an Illinois girl so far. I'm 40 years old. I lived a relatively sheltered childhood, and looking back, I have no idea why. I don't know if it was just, because I always said we were middle class. We weren't lower middle class. We weren't upper middle class. We didn't have the finer things, but we weren't super struggling, so we were middle class. So we took vacations like one state away. Like we didn't do like road trips and go, we didn't do like fly anywhere or go skiing or do any of those kinds of things. We just went like up to Wisconsin or over to Michigan. Like those are the two places we always went. So I'm definitely a Midwest girl. And a lot of people say I have an accent, and obviously I don't hear it. But what's funny is I can adapt to the accents of people I talk to. So I used to work customer service, and we had a range of territory that included the far north, so like Minnesota, North Dakota, all that, all the way down south, like Texas, Alabama, Arkansas, and my coworkers used to always like take fun little jabs at me when I'd get off the phone, and they'd be like, "You were talking to somebody from Fargo, weren't you?" How'd you know?
That's awesome. So I'm guessing because you have a business where you help moms carve out their own job or business and do it on their own, that at some point you were working corporate America.
I was. So I've had some type of office and or corporate job, depending on how you look at it, since I was 21. And I've always been that ideal worker bee employee, right? You give me the tasks, I get them done sooner than you need them, and I get them done better than you expected.
Did you go to college? Oh, I'm sorry. Did you go to college and do all the stuff we're supposed to do these things, right?
Right.
And live in this box. So tell me how that went for you.
Right. Well, and here's where I struggled because I've always been a creative. I've always been artistic. Like writing has been my thing since I think I was in the 3rd grade. I like to draw and color and things like that, but writing was always my thing. And as I got older, through high school and stuff, I wanted to go to beauty school and be a hairdresser and a makeup artist because that was like a huge passion of mine for many, many years, even after high school. I ended up going to college instead, against my own will. Family was like, "No, you have to go. You're the first one to ever go. You have to go." And I said, "Are you paying for it?" And they said, "No." And I said, "Then why do I have to go? Like, if you're not paying for it, then why do I have to go spend thousands of dollars that I don't want to spend?" And having fit into the good student box in high school, I was lucky enough to get most of my freshman and sophomore year of college covered by scholarships and grants.
That's awesome. That's exceptional.
Yeah, and I went to local colleges, so I didn't dorm anywhere. I lived at home and I commuted. But I think my freshman year, out of I think it was like $13,000 or $14,000 tuition, I only had to pay like $2,500 out of pocket, including books. So not bad.
Great, actually, that's amazing.
Yeah, and then my second year, I switched schools, and their tuition was a little bit lower, and I ended up paying like $1,800, including books for, for tuition. And then junior year came around, and I had almost everything covered except for $5,000. My now ex-husband and I had just gotten married, and we got married just after my sophomore year in college. And at 19 years old with A+ credit, about five or six banks, I don't remember the number, basically gave me the middle finger for a $5,000 loan, telling me I wasn't requesting enough. And I was like, wait a minute. So you're going to sit there and tell me that if I was going to ask for full tuition, you'd give it to me? But because I'm a good student and I bust my butt and I'm working 40 hours a week and going to school at, with all these credit hours that my advisor is telling me you got to slow down on your courses, I only need $5,000 and you're going to tell me no? And they're like, yeah, you're screwed. Okay. So off to the working world, Natalie went.
Well, right, clear. And that's crazy that they want you to borrow more money. So you're
Right.
married at 19.
Mm-hmm.
And jump in and tell me a little bit about that situation.
Well, we met while we worked together in retail, and things, like, everything was really good. It was, we were on the same page with everything as far as kids and like 5-year plan and things like that. And we struggled like most newlyweds do, and we had a lot of ups and downs, but at the beginning, overall, it was pretty good, right? Very supportive of each other. Families were fine with everything eventually. His family was great through the whole thing. My family has some issues, but they have issues no matter what. So it's a no-win in that situation. But we had our apartment, and I started my first office job not too long after we got married, and it was admin work. So I was supposed to be doing like filing and answering the phones. And 2 weeks in, the owner's wife, who was the office manager, took a stack of paper that was, no joke, at least 1.5 feet tall, slammed it on my desk and said, "You figure this shit out. I'm out of here." And she took her assistant with her. And I went, oh, okay. And then he comes running in my office telling me, "You can never effing call her for anything ever again." I was like, okay, like, I don't know how to do accounts payable or accounts receivable or payroll or tax stuff or order inventory, or like, I don't know how to do all this stuff. So I figured it out. And I think that's what led me to be that, that ideal employee, right? Was that I was thrown into a situation, and it's not like we couldn't work. It's not like I couldn't work. We needed both of our incomes. And I just did it.
Well,
And from there,
you were like the perfect employee too, right?
yeah, I mean, I didn't complain. I was there for 2 years, and I didn't start complaining about anything until probably a year in. And it was legit, like, I was being treated poorly. He refused to hire warehouse help. So I was working the office, and I was organizing the showroom, and I had to go back and load trucks. Like, what? No, like, hire somebody for $8 an hour. This was 20 years ago. So I was like, hire somebody for $8 an hour to drive that damn forklift on somebody's truck, because I'm not doing it. Either that, or you need to stay here. Like, you need to stay here until all the trucks pick up. And he's like, no, I'm not doing that. So I quit. And then he came to my house and offered me a raise if I came back. So I accepted. And then like 3 months later, I quit again. And he came to my house and offered me a raise again. And then the third time I quit, I locked the door and I left a note, and I said, "I'm courteous enough to lock your door. Please call me when you can come to my house and grab my office key, because I did lock up for you." Because if I was spiteful, I would have just left it all open. Right. And he was like, well, I'll give you this much. I'm like, no, I'm done. Like, this is the third time I'm quitting. I'm done. Like, I'm 21 years old at this point. I'm 21 years old. I'm having chest pains, which at the time I didn't know what it was, but now I know it was panic attacks. I'm like, I'm having chest pains and there's nobody in the office. Plus I was a smoker at the time. So of course, what's a smoker do when they have chest pains? They smoke, because that makes things better. But
So you're 21 now
um,
and your health is going down and your stress level's going up
right.
and you're trying to do like the corporate thing. So I know you said you're now ex-husband.
Yes.
So how long were you married, and take us through the corporate life in that time that you kind of lived through, struggled through?
Yeah. So I was at that first job for like 2 years, and then I moved on to a heating and cooling contractor, which was like my grandpa's ideal for everybody in the family, because my grandpa was a pipe fitter. He was a heating and cooling guy, and he told everybody, you got to get in somewhere with heating and cooling because everybody's always going to need heat and everybody's always going to need air. And I got in with this contractor and they were fantastic. And I leveled up there like nobody's business. Within my first 3 months, I had like a $15,000 raise based on my performance, which was like, that's like unheard of anywhere. And it wasn't even like a promotion raise. It was just like, hey, you started out as a temp and we're hiring you on and you're doing so well that we're going to pay you this much more. And we're not telling the temp agency that that's what we're going to pay you. We're telling them this because, all the logistics of that. So I stayed there for 4 years. And again, it was perfect worker bee, taking on more work, getting it all done, helping out all the other departments. I was the right hand for so many people because it was kind of like jack of all trades situation, right? I knew just enough about every department to be useful for everybody at any given time. And so 4 years there, and then I went to another heating and cooling company. They actually recruited me at my desk phone. So I don't know if any of your listeners know any like pipe fitters, service techs of that nature, but they gossip. They gossip worse than like 90-year-old ladies on bunko night. And so I get this phone call at my desk one day and they're like, hey, this is so-and-so from this company. Have you heard of us? And I'm like, no. I'm like, what do you want? We hear that you're really unhappy there and we would love to schedule an interview because we also hear that you are a rock star when it comes to billing, admin, and dispatch. And I went, oh, okay. And they're like, how about, and it was like 2 days from now, whatever day that was. And I was like, okay. So I went to my boss's office and I was like, hey, I gotta take this day off. It's unexpected. And he's like, why? And I'm like, I'll tell you later. And I did the interview and I got a call when I was on my way back home from the interview saying, we're sending your offer letter out today. So I was at that company for 2 years. And it was a mutual departure as far as that goes. And again, it was like a stress level thing. There was only 4 people, including me, in the office. So there was a lot on me that should have been either another person added to the team or should have been split up better. And there was a lot of undue criticism. I worked hard. My attitude probably could have been better. I know could have been better, but that's when I started going through hard times with my now ex-husband, right? So while it didn't affect the quantity of work and not really even the quality of work, it affected my attitude with people I worked with. So that was a mutual agreement. Me and the boss one day, we were just like we're both done with this, right?
I mean, that's not a bad way. I had a job like that, and it was a job I was really passionate about. Like, would have retired, stayed there forever, super committed. But when you hit a certain point, it was a very nice mutual decision to walk away. So I get that. And now you're having issues. You're about 8 years into your relationship.
Yeah, I was about 8 years in, and having issues, not only financial, but just like communication issues and any kind of possible relationship issue you could have, we were having. So I was actually working an MLM on the side at the time too. So him and I did agree that I would take like a month or so off, just to kind of decompress, work on my MLM stuff, just to keep a little bit of money coming in and look for something that was better suited for me. Well, it turned out that my MLM stuff, when I really focused on it, was bringing in just as much as my 9-to-5 job was. So I was like, okay, well, we're going to stick this out for as long as we can until I can't stand like being around the house for this long anymore. And I ended up finding a customer service position in a place not too far from the house. And technically it was pay-wise, it was a demotion, but I didn't want the stress. I felt the minimization of the stress was more important than the paycheck at that point. And there was another place where I worked hard. I will say forever and ever that the boss I had in that position, she's actually still one of my very good friends. She's my across the street neighbor right now. She is one of the best bosses I've ever had, because she acknowledged when I was working hard. She was open when I said I needed help. She didn't demean me like other bosses had. She challenged me, because I was also one of those employees that, you know, a lot of people don't like, because I'm like, give me more work. And she's like, what do you mean give you more work? I'm like, I'm done. Give me more work. She's like, what do you mean you're done? I'm like, I'm done. Give me more. So that also set me up in that company to be the perfect worker bee, right? They started tracking my metrics and comparing everybody else's order entry, phone calls, quote turnaround time, all that stuff. They started comparing it to mine, which was a little stressful. And I was there for about a year when I walked up to my boss and I said, I need these 2 days off because this is when I'm leaving my husband. And she went, oh, do we need to go in the other room and talk? Because we had kind of like an open floor plan. And I was like, no, because everybody's going to know. Like, I'm just going to tell them, because they're going to need to know why I'm not going to be a pleasant person for a little while. Like, it's just out of courtesy to them. So it's fine, but I'm telling you, like, I can't have you not approve these days, because I've already coordinated with family to help me move out when he's not home. So go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sure you're going to jump into it. So what had happened and you haven't had kids at all?
At this point, no. Him and I didn't have kids. We had 2 dogs and a cat together.
Okay. So no kids, a 10-year relationship.
Mm-hmm.
What happened in the relationship leading up to you needing to structure it that way? Because that's more extreme than leaving. It is.
It was a lot of mental and emotional abuse. It was, so we went in thinking we were on the same page as far as kids and stuff went. And at first when I was young and stupid, I wanted 4 kids. But because my grandma had 4 kids and I wanted 4 kids like grandma had. And then I was like, no, and he would always say, no, 3. And I said, I'm not having an odd number. I want 2 or 4. Cause I was an only child until I was 15. So I was like, only child stuff, that's like, no, like we can be responsible adults and give the child a sibling. Not that there's anything wrong with being an only child, but that just wasn't what I didn't want to have. I wanted to have an even number, 2 or 4. And he said, fine, 2. And these conversations happened over the course of the 10 years. And after we were in a better place financially, I said, okay, how about now? And he's like, no, we're in this apartment. Let's wait till we get a house. Okay. So like within a year we bought a house, and I said, okay, how about now? And he said, I only want one. I said, I told you I'm not doing an odd number of children. It's 2 or 4. Like, I'm okay with 2. Like, I'm okay with 2. And he ended up eventually looking at me and saying, you're too fat to have kids. I'm embarrassed to be seen with you.
Oh, is that all? Like, no big deal, by the way.
Right. So we would go to lunch at his family's, at his grandparents' house, and they were, his grandparents immigrated here from the former Yugoslavia, and so they were very broken English and stuff. And when his grandma or his mom would ask why there were no grandchildren yet, because he was the oldest of his siblings, I never knew what to say. And then when he'd said this to me, that's when the gloves came out. And I said, I don't know. Why don't you ask your a-hole son why he thinks I'm too fat to have kids? And I'd walk out. And they laid into him pretty good about that. But they also didn't make me feel great about my weight. I had gained, in our first year of marriage, I had gained 90 pounds just because of the stress and eating like crap, because we were young and we thought we can eat like crap. And, you know, there wasn't the knowledge back then that there is now about all this junk that's in our foods that screws us up. So I let that, I can't say I let it go. It was still there and it was still very hurtful, but how I interacted with him definitely changed. There was minimal interaction. I started telling him, I'm not going to your families for any events. You go to your family, I'll go to mine. And if they ask, just say we're really busy and we had to, divide and conquer, essentially. And he started a new job. And one morning he was telling me about the work Christmas party. And I was like, oh, are we going? Because my job had a Christmas party and they invited spouses, and the job before that invited spouses. And he's like, no, but I'm going. And I was like, oh, is it only employees? Because I've heard of companies that do that too, only employees. And he said, again, no, you're too fat. I'm embarrassed to be seen with you. So I said, okay. And I did really good. I, again, at the time I was a smoker. So I dyed out my cigarette and I took a deep breath and I got in the car and I went to work. And I drove as fast as humanly possible to work, which I don't recommend, especially when you're having like a panic attack and crying and black makeup all down your face on a highway. It's not a good idea. And I got there and everybody was like, oh my God, what's wrong? Like they thought something physical happened. And I told them, and they were like, all right, like he is not invited to any of our stuff anymore. Like, here's like, you already have everybody's phone numbers. Please call us if you ever need anything, weekends, after hours, whatever, because now they had this feeling that there was something more that would happen. It didn't get to that point, but not because it wasn't headed that way. It didn't get to that point because I stopped it. He raised his hand to me one time and I stood up to him. Now, mind you, I'm like 5'3", 5'4", 5'4" on a good day. We'll say 5'4". And, some chunky little 5'4" girl, and he was 6'2", 260 pounds, and he was raising his hand to me. And I stood up to him and I told him he needed to back the F down because I was either going to call the police or I would kill him. And not that I don't know. I don't know what I would do in that situation, but those were the two options I gave him. So like, you back off, and if you don't, this is what's going to happen. And that's when I really started planning when I was going to leave. I started packing boxes. He didn't even notice that I was packing stuff. He started spending a lot of time out with who, I'm not sure. Which also led to, more disagreements, arguments, and animosity and all that. I slowly started bringing stuff over to my mom's house. Like I would pack up my car, like jam pack it full of as many Avon boxes as I could. And I would like try and make 2 trips a night, like 2 or 3 times a week to clear out the house as much as I could. So my mom's basement was like packed with whatever, just clothes and just stuff that I wasn't using every day. Right. And, I sat down with him one weekend and I said, I want a divorce. And he said, well, I don't believe in divorce. And I said, well, I don't believe in hating you for the rest of my life, so I want a divorce. And he said, I'm not going to let you leave. And that was when I was like, okay, so I have to do this in a way where it's very time constrained. I'm going to have to do it when he's at work. It's not going to be like a weekend amicable, like you leave the house so I can move and things like that. It's not going to be this way. I already knew that. And so I planned 2 days. My original 2 days were in February. And we got snowed, like blizzard hit us. So I had to cancel. And then the next 2 days I planned were in April, because normally in Chicago, April, you don't get a blizzard. You might get some snow, but you don't get a blizzard. So I planned it so that I had a truck rented. I had my family on standby like 2 blocks away. I'm like, you need to leave your house at this time to be at the post office parking lot. Here's the directions to the post office parking lot. And then you need to drive here, park in the street. And I'm going to go with Papa, my grandpa. I'm going to go with Papa. We're going to get the truck. You guys are going to load up my car and your car and my cousin's car when she gets here. And as soon as we get the truck, we're throwing everything in. And we're leaving. And I left. I took basically only what I came in with. I didn't take any of the furniture. I didn't take the TV. I took the table that the kitchen table that he didn't like, that he didn't want me to buy, and just my clothes and all the animals, because I didn't trust him with the animals. And I moved out and had the truck back all in 6 hours. And he came back from work and called me and said, what's going on? And I said, I asked for a divorce, and this is what happens when you tell me no. I do it anyway.
Were you able to get the divorce fairly easily paperwork wise after that?
I ended up, he refused to get a lawyer, and he actually refused to be served. So I ended up paying his part of everything through my lawyer. And, I ended up serving him the papers instead of the sheriff. And, I left in April, and the week before Thanksgiving, we were divorced.
So, I mean, depending on the state, that's not the end of the world, but
right.
Yeah, but a pain in the ass nonetheless.
Yeah, for sure.
So you're on your own now, and you're still doing the worker bee thing, and you like your boss, who you still like, which is good to know.
Yes.
Because regardless of the fact that ended. So tell me, now I know you're married again.
Mm-hmm.
So how hard was it to date, and what was different? And tell me about that, because I know it was a lot different.
Yeah, well, it was crazy because, I'd been married for just short of 10 years. So I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And I actually met my current husband 2 days after I left my ex-husband. So we've known each other for like 10 years now, but we've only been married for 2.5 years, and we've only really been together for like 7.5 years. So it was rough because I was living with family, and even after a lot of discussion, which in our house is yelling, I joke. My family is just very loud because we're Italian, and we all have hearing problems. So like we just have to be loud. So there was a lot of yelling. But not yelling at each other, just like yelling to get your point across type thing, about like, never tell anybody that I came home, because this is not my home. Like, I only lived here for a year before I moved out. This is not my home. You can tell people I'm living here, but don't refer to this as my home, because I don't like this area, and I'm only here out of necessity. And I set up all these ground rules, and everybody agreed to them, and then everybody backed out of any kind of respect for me at all. And they thought that because I was divorced, I was going to live there for the rest of my life, and I would never meet anybody else. So I had to essentially, at 28 years old, I had to hide that I was dating people, like 28, 29, 30 years old. I had to hide that I was dating. Like, ridiculous. And so my current husband and I, we were just talking. He had already had plans to move closer to his family, which was further away. So we just stayed friends and chit-chatted here and there. And I really struggled with who I was after the divorce, because I always wanted kids, and now, I'm almost 30 and I don't have kids. And is it too late for me to have kids? Because my family has a history of early menopause, and I know the doctors say that family history, when it comes to that, doesn't mean anything, but does it? And there's always a chance. And and when I say early menopause, I mean like 36. So, like, ridiculous. And so I was like, okay, I got to come to terms with the fact that I may never have kids, um and things like that. So it was a struggle. And my boss and my coworkers put up with a lot from me. And I was at my job for 5 years when my current husband and I finally started dating. 4 years. Somewhere in there, 4 or 5, when we finally started dating. And he had been in a relationship, and they broke up while she was pregnant. And we were visiting he'd moved back out closer to where I was, just because jobs were more plentiful out here than out there. He was living like close to the Illinois-Iowa border. And there's not a whole lot going on out there. I mean, there's a lot of corn, and there's a lot of soybeans. There's a couple of factories. There's not a whole lot going on out there. You really got to drive if you want like decent employment most of the time. So we had his daughter for one day out of one weekend, and to visit with his family and stuff like that. And one thing led to another with her mom, and the police awarded emergency custody to him. So I essentially became a mom overnight. And I was okay with that. I mean, I'd helped people raise their kids, no problem. So I was like, I know how to do it. Like, diapers and vomit and poop and all that stuff, it doesn't scare me. I know how to feed a baby. I know how to, I know how to do all this stuff. I know, doctor's appointments, like I know all this stuff because I've helped all these other people with theirs. So like, I'm good with it. And we just kind of let things just flow from there. I got, let's see, our daughter, and I say our daughter because I've since adopted her. I adopted her when she was 5 years old, just so that nobody's confused. It started out his daughter. I've always called her our daughter because he's always had primary custody, but it's officially our daughter for the last like 2.5 years. Awesome. So she was just coming up on a year old when we found out I was pregnant with our son. And so then we were like, okay, my family didn't care for that at all. And that led to a whole other podcast of stress. So we found a place. My aunt let us live in her condo temporarily, but 2 adults, a baby, 4 dogs, and a cat in a 2-bedroom condo is really tight. And the dogs didn't like the condo much because it was just too enclosed, and there's all these noises they don't know and stuff like that. So we were able to find a house to rent. And I had our son in March. We moved into the house middle of January, and I had him at the beginning of March in 2013. And while I was pregnant with him, I'd gotten my first promotion. And it was totally out of the customer service department. It was in the materials planning department. So I was doing like purchasing and inventory kind of stuff, and scheduling, manufacturing scheduling, and things like that. And I was really happy with it. And it helped us take off some of the financial stress so that we can focus on like, okay, now what do we need to do? Like, all this other stress is done, like all this rush, find a place to live kind of stuff. It's done now. So what do we want to do? What's best for us? Right. So, my husband found a job that was close to where I was working. So we were like, well, what makes sense is for us to get out, like find a house to rent out by where we work so that we're not both driving 22 miles one way. And that was when gas was like $4 and something a gallon. So that was a lot of money that we were spending in just commute time. Right. So we moved into the house we're in now. We've been here for 5 years. And about a year, little more than a year after I had that promotion, I got another promotion. The situation was my boss, who was one of my counterparts in customer service, had gotten her promotion before I had gotten mine. And she ended up being my boss. And her husband were struggling, and she ended up leaving and moving to where our corporate office was in Virginia. So we knew her position was going to be open. And so she was kind of like training me on it and saying like, I don't know that you're going to get this position, but you're the logical choice because you already know all this. And if they brought anybody from the outside in, they'd be really stupid. And then me, operating 100% from ego, said, if I have to train my boss, I quit. So they better give me the position. And one day, the facility manager called me into his office and he was like, hey, sit down, close the door. And I'm like, oh shit, what did I do? Am I in trouble again? And because I always seem to get in trouble for doing the right thing for the customer, because it wasn't necessarily in the, it wasn't within the box of what was okay to do, but it was still okay to do. And he's like, no. He's like, you're not in trouble. I want to tell you something. And I went, what? And he goes, you get her job when she leaves. And I went, what? And he's like, yeah. He's like, we're not even putting it out to anybody. Like, we're not putting it out internally. We're not putting it out externally. He's like, me and executive management have already had these discussions, and you're getting that job when she leaves. So their HR is putting your offer letter together now. They'll email it to you. If you have any questions about it, let me know. Sign it, scan it back. And yeah. And I was like, okay. So, and so I was in that position for a little more than 4 years, I think. And when I decided to leave. Yeah, because I was there sort of 5 years when I left.
The relationship's better. Kids are okay. You're settling in. You're in a house.
Yeah.
Job is going well. Like your story, other than the emotional abuse from your ex-husband and a super psych that you adopted, all that stuff. But like, it's what a lot of women go through, right? You just get into the grind and you're doing what
you just do it.
Right. You don't feel like there's a plan B. And
no.
At what point, because I really want to tie in, I know what you're doing now is helping women to find their passion and build their business and not have to feel the way you did. Right. So you hit that point.
I did.
And I know you said you were ugly crying in my notes.
Yes. Oh my God. So bad. Okay. So what had happened was the boss that had put me into this fantastic position, he ended up leaving the company, and he, the leave was, he put in his notice, but it was not anything nasty, right? It wasn't a nasty way. There was no scandal behind it. He was just like, no, my wife and I are choosing a different route for our lives. So we're like traveling and doing this, that, and the other. Okay, fine. Now that I'm smarter, and I really understand what that position entailed, I know he was getting sick from the job. The stress of the job was making him physically ill. He had cancer when he was in his early 20s and late teens or early 20s, and it had been successfully removed, and it was starting to come back. And this was him taking care of him. And I so respect that. And I think once I realized what he really did, that was why I chose to do what I chose to do. So what they did was they brought in somebody from outside the company to lead our facility. And for the company I worked for the industry we're in, You really, to be the operations manager of a regional facility, you really need to know the inner workings of almost every position in the company. You need to know how customer service works. You need to know how accounting works. You need to know how planning and inventory and all that stuff works within the company, because the company had it so niched to them that it wasn't necessarily the same way every other company in the world did it, right? So they brought in this woman who they told me was very nice and that I could learn a lot from. And I should have taken that not as incentive, but as a warning. And she was very set in her ways. She is a very educated woman, which I admire, but her social emotional skills were very lacking. So when she would come to me or my team or any of my counterparts and talk to them, she was very just like shitty about everything. Like she was always offending everybody. She was always, you know, she was just always saying the wrong thing at the wrong time, and she wouldn't listen to what we would have to say, like, this is how we've done it. I don't care how you've done it. This is how you're doing it now because this is what worked at my last company. Okay, but that's not going to work here. So then we'd go through the whole drudgery of doing it the way she wanted to do it and then let it get all effed up and then say, okay, can we do it our way now? And it just, everything just took like a million years longer. At one point, she called me into her office and said, hey, so my boss wants me to train with you, and I don't understand why he wants me to train with you. And I said, well, because a boss should know the job of their employee. Like I know how to do every job everybody on my team knows how to do. So maybe you should know how to do my job in case like I'm out one day, because there's stuff that I do that my team doesn't know how to do. They don't have authorization to do. And she's like, well, I guess so. And then she started with, I know what it's like to be a working mom and not have family close by. And I want to make things easier on you than they were for me 30 years ago, because it was just so hard being a working mom in a male-dominated industry. And I just want to make it easier on you. And I think psychologically, subconsciously, 40 and Slippy, I don't know what it was, but she like intentionally made shit harder on me, to the point where people from other facilities were calling me going, why is she doing this to you? Why is she doing this to you? Why does she not let you just do your job? Because you know what you're doing and it's been working for this long. So I ended up, before she started, I had lost 30 pounds. And after she started, I gained that 30 pounds back. And I put myself back on track and lost that 30 pounds again. And then I gained that 30 pounds again. And it was all stress related. I was working 14, 16 hours a day. I was just ridiculously stressed out. I was coming home and I was raging at my kids, just like my kids weren't even like, my daughter was just in preschool. She wasn't even old enough to know anything yet. And I was like raging at her to pick up her, GD backpack, and why is it on the floor? And why aren't your shoes in the right spot? And like, she's 4. Why am I yelling at her like this? And after some time of this, and I didn't like how it felt, and I didn't like who I was turning into, I sat down with my husband, and it was August of 2017, and my boss had been there for 3 years. So it was literally 3 years of like ridiculous hell for me, because I can't be micromanaged. Like, give me a task and let me do it, but don't tell me how to do it every 7 minutes. So I sat down on the couch with him after the kids went to bed, and and I remember August 2017, because I told him, I'm giving myself 1 year to get out of this job. I'm going to create an exit plan. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I am not going back into a corporate thing. I can't work for anybody else anymore, because everything I see from all these people I know in different corporate positions, all these businesses are doing it this same way, and it's not working. They're making their people sick. They're ignoring their customers. Like, this is not what I'm about. and I'm not about to continue to screw over the customer and the company at the same time. And I'm not about to sit back and see other people do it and not call attention to it. So that was August 2017, and he was very supportive. He's like, okay, he's like, let's start figuring it out. And I think it was September or October, I found a online course that kind of said like, here's how you start a business. And I was like, okay, let's check it out. Like, I want to write, right? I've always been a writer, so I want to write. So to me, blogging was natural. And I was like, all right, so how can I monetize blogging? Like, how can I, and I already knew that I wanted my blog to help the working mom community. I wanted other working moms to know that shit sucks, but you can get through it if you can acknowledge why it sucks. Like, my husband and I have fantastic communication, and we were able to make strategic decisions about when it was time for him to just do kind of not the minimum, but perform at his job description, right? And for me to really put the big effort in at the office. And then have another discussion later that it was time for me to do my job description and for him to put in the big effort so that he can level up in his position, right? So we were able to have those pretty intense conversations about how we needed to handle our life as far as our jobs, our family, our relationship went. And he was very supportive in me figuring all this out. And ultimately, this led me to, I left my job 6 months sooner. I left my job in April of 2018. And so it's been just over a year when we're recording this. And I don't regret a day. Like, people have asked me, like, would you ever want to go back, or would you want to go back to corporate? And not at all. Not at all. Because I get to help moms who felt like how I felt. And I get to tell them that there's something else, like there's a passion that you have that you can implement into your life that can help you through this shitty time. You know, if I would have started blogging 3 years before I did, would I have continued it just as a side hustle? Maybe. But that's not my path. My path was to figure out in the last few months that blogging soothed me enough to be able to deal with the corporate BS. And then it was time for me to make my exit. And November of 2018 was kind of as much as I'd already made the decision, November 2018 was very much the nail in the coffin, so to speak. I'd gotten a pretty nasty email from a salesperson, and I corrected her. And I revised this email 4 times and had 3 people look at it to make sure that I wasn't coming off as the bitch in the conversation. And because I can be very blunt, like, no, that's not how you do it. This is how you do it. Please let me know when it's done. Thank you. Right. And some people don't like that. A lot of people don't like that, but I don't care. So I had literally 4 or 5 revisions and like 3 people review it. And everybody was like, no, that sounds fine. That sounds fine. She went ahead, and the salesperson went ahead and replied back to me, copying my boss, her boss, and everybody in executive management, who then, and then, you know, I replied with a very brief, like, hey, this is our process. And I see that executive management's copied. So if they want to talk to me about it, I'm happy to go through it with them. So that got somebody's panties in a wad. So I got talked to like the next day, and my boss was like, you can never speak to that echelon of people ever again. And I'm like, echelon of people? Where the hell are you? Like, who are you talking to? Echelon of people? Like, what? Huh? Like, I know what it means, but like, that's not how we talk here. Like, what do you know? And I was like, okay, fine. So if I can't talk to this person when I have a $60,000 or $100,000 purchase order that he needs to approve, are you going to send that to him? And I knew what the answer was because she was afraid of him. And she's like, oh no, you can go ahead and send those. And I was like, okay. So then like a week later, her boss is in town for our Thanksgiving lunch and, just to save face and, say hi to everybody and like, I'm present kind of situation. And he was like, hey, he's like, can we talk tomorrow? And I'm like, let's talk now. And he's like, no, I want to take you for coffee. And I was like, stop right there. Nobody in this company has ever taken anybody for coffee in the middle of the day without there being an ulterior motive. So what do you want from me? And him and I had previously had a good relationship. And he's like, no. He's like, are you embarrassed? I'm like, I'm not embarrassed about anything, but I know you have an ulterior motive. So why do you want to take me for coffee? We can sit in the conference room. We can sit in my office. We can sit in the other room and we can chat tomorrow. You don't have to take me for coffee. And he's like, okay. So the next day comes and we sit down and he pulls up his phone and he's like, so how's your husband? How's the kids? How's the dog? And my dog had just passed away like a month before and month and a half before. And I have him tattooed on my forearm. And I looked at him, I said, my husband's fine, my kids are fine, my dog's effing dead. Like, I was like, as mean. And I was like, what do you want? Why are we in here? And anybody else who would have talked to him like that would have gotten fired. I guarantee it. But he's like, well, let me pull up this email. I said, no, she already talked to me about the email. Why are we talking about the email twice? I didn't do anything wrong. Okay. The salesperson lied. I caught her in a lie. I corrected her very professionally. It's not my fault. Somebody didn't like what I said. And he looked at me and he said, Natalie, it doesn't matter that you do things the right way. You cannot tell people when they're wrong. And I went, oh, okay. And he said, if you want the next promotion, which was going to be my boss's job because she was only a few years away from retirement when they hired her on. He goes, if you want that next promotion, you're going to keep your mouth shut, you're going to keep your head down, and you're going to do your job.
So that's the exact reason why you want to make sure you can work with other women who are in these same situations, getting spoken to that way.
Yeah. Whether it's by a woman boss, a male boss, it doesn't matter. Like I didn't feel that low and inferior since I was with my ex-husband. And I was like, this is not happening to me. I am not inferior to you. You do not speak to me that way. Like that type of, just that talking to somebody that way is, I don't want anybody to ever feel that way. And that, I think it was around then when I decided that it was like, okay, blogging, like here's this course that I'm taking and I'm tossing around blogging. And I was like, yes, blogging has to be the way that I can get to other women who are having these same struggles, women who are busting their ass in their job and they're a top performer and they keep working and working and working and working. And they're being talked down to and they're being told they're not good enough. And they keep getting just berated and belittled and told that they're nothing. And that's BS because we can do so much. Like we have so much capability. We're moms. Like people don't understand how much we can do. Like when you can feed a baby and have a phone conversation and let the dogs out and, do laundry and do all these, like we're pretty much rock stars. And I just never want anybody to feel that way, which is why I want to empower moms to find that thing that fulfills them, whether they keep it as a hobby, fine. But if they can monetize it, which they can, you can monetize anything and keep it as a side hustle. And eventually, if they want to give the big middle finger to their job, they can. And that's my goal in life, is to have as many women as possible give the big middle finger to their job.
Woo! So I would like to end on what your advice to those moms would be that are at that crossroads. There's nothing wrong with having a job either.
No.
I always thought of my job as funding my passion, and it allowed me to pay my bills while I could let that grow. And that's a beautiful thing if you have that attitude. Like this is just a funding opportunity for your passion. So right. What advice would you give them when they're in that crossroads of not knowing what to do or wanting to do something, or they know what to do but not how. And let's end on that, so these moms want to reach out and not live this life.
Yeah, for sure. So when you're at that point, first of all, sister, you need to realize that you matter. All of this negative talk and you're not good enough BS that everybody's spewing at you, that's got nothing to do with you, and it's got everything to do with them and their insecurities and their internal BS, and you are a rock star at everything you do. We don't purposely fail at things. I mean, and that's how they like to make it seem, is that we're purposely letting down our boss or whatever, and we're not. So first of all, I want you to know that you matter. I want you to know that there is something out there that fuels you. There's something. Maybe it's a hobby you dropped when you got pregnant or when the kids got a little bit older. Maybe it's something you dropped before even kids were in the picture. Maybe you dropped it after high school, right? Maybe you're very artistic and you dropped it so that you could fit into that box of college and corporate and family and big box stores and all that stuff that we all do, right? But there's something that fuels you, and you need to spend some time on that. Even if you don't want to monetize it, you need to spend some time on that. Writing, drawing, coloring, working out, knitting, crocheting, dog grooming, makeup, I don't care, hair, nails, whatever it is. Whatever makes you feel like you just kicked ass at something, that's what you need to do a little bit of every day. And when I say a little bit, it can be 10, 15 minutes. Because if you're at that spot where I was in the corporate world, 10 or 15 minutes is going to make 100% difference in how you feel throughout your day.
Yay! Thank you, Natalie.
You're welcome.
I love that your story brought you to this place where your passion is helping other women find their passion. So
yes.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you having me, Jen. I was really looking forward to it. And I was like, ooh, I get to talk to Jen.
Thank you for taking the time to get naked with us. If you'd like to bear it all with me, get in touch. Your story is unique and valuable. Let's show it off.